Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and SUPERMAC. Good evening, Malcolm. How are you?
All right, Steve. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sort of calmed down after last night. I was getting a bit irate, I think,
Well, it's
with it all.
no surprise, to be honest. I think it gets you. It's the passion that takes over, Mal. I mean, you're a Newcastle fan, and it's become, it's quite obvious to people when they're watching the comments that we get back. People can see the passion in you. They can see the passion in John Gibson. They can see the passion in me. It's one of those things, So look, from our perspective, now the dust settled. What's your view on the Villa game last night?
What I'd like to do is go into the dressing room and stand in front of about 8 of the players and say, on Sunday, I saw you playing really, really well. It was your first game back after a dreadfully long layoff. I saw you, but you were out there and doing the business. You were blending with all the other black and white shirts around. So why 3 days later do you go out there and you're doing half the running you did, you're putting half the effort in, you just didn't look the same player? And I would ask 8 at least that very question and put the very same point to, because they were so under par, but at the same time, by comparison to Wednesday, why can't they just do it 2 games in a row? You're 3-4 days apart between games, plenty of time to recover. And I just don't understand how the performance can be that good. And they looked last night, I felt so ragbaggish. They were even starting to make Aston Villa look good. Look at the league table and see where Aston Villa is. That in itself tells a story about Newcastle United. And I was so disappointed. One of the arts of football and being able to get some success is to be able to, when you've had a win, get out there and put the same type of performance in the next game and get a win and another win and another win. That's all that Liverpool's done. And Liverpool, they've got into this marvellous, magnificent flow, and the confidence within the dressing room and out on the pitch when you see them is sky high. And all they've done is just done it very simply. They've won a game and said, okay, come on, let's make it 2. Then let's make it 3. And that's what they've done. With Newcastle, they, I don't think, are saying anything like that to each other, to themselves. Somebody has got to say, hey, come on, don't just go out and win a game. How about putting 2 or 3 wins together and putting it in their mentality? Because I thought the mentality in last night's game was dreadful. I'm not going to fault the goalkeeper over the 90 minutes, nor would I fault Richie. But I thought the defence looked shaky. The midfield, they weren't helping the defence out much. They certainly weren't offering much to the forwards. Well, and the forwards that started, my word, they looked to me as if they'd never played the game before. Both Almiron and Joelinton. And you would have thought that Joelinton, having scored that all-important goal that he's waited so long for, and we've all waited so long for, he comes out and looks as if it was an accident that happened on the Sunday, and that he hasn't got a clue. And that I'm afraid, I've seen that so many times in him, that's what I'm coming to believe, that he hasn't got a clue. You could stick a 12-year-old out, and sooner or later he's going to trip over a ball in the 6-yard box, and it'll probably go over the line. So is that how we treat Joelinton?
Yeah, Yeah, there's a lot of people agreeing with you, Malcolm. Jeff says, "Beautiful, Mal. That's so true. If only you could go into the dressing room and see the players." Kieran Williams says the players aren't good enough. Mac, good players can do it consistently. Yeah, I would agree, Malcolm. I mean, look, the dust settled. Would I have settled for 4 points in the opening 2 games? Yes, I would, because I didn't, I didn't think we'd get the points against Sheffield United to start with, but the sending off helped, and Newcastle comprehensively beat them. And we've ended up with 4 points out of the 2 games. It's taken us to 39 points. It takes us, a point away from the magical 40 with plenty of games to play. But yeah, I think you're right, and I think Kieran does make a good point. The players aren't really good enough, Malin. There was a little tendency. I mentioned this briefly last night when we did the post-match talk about the knee-jerk reaction you get from fans, especially on social media, and that's a 3-0 win against 10 men was greeted as if Newcastle were now suddenly going to be challenging for Champions League places. It was a bit weird, it's that modern era of supporters. There's people who of my age group who, my first team was the 83-84 team. We have people who watch the show who are older than me, who remember your era in the 70s, and we have some people who watch the show who go back even further. Some just round about the 50s they started watching it, and we've all got different ways and we've all got different opinions. But I think generally, the older fan is a lot more level-headed because we're all a bit more skeptical and we've all been through the disappointments before. Whereas there's this tendency to get carried away, Mal, now, which I don't think there ever was back in your day.
Sure. And I would agree with you, Steve. I was reading a manager speaking to a journalist. It was in the paper. I think it was the Daily Mail. And the manager said, I go in the dressing room and I'm nice to everybody. And I thought, what a peculiar thing for a manager to say. You've got to be honest, not nice. And if people are doing well, tell them, oh, you're doing great, you're doing brilliant, fabulous. But if they aren't putting it in, like Newcastle last night, you've got to go in and tell a few home truths. And you've got to make life very uncomfortable for the players so that you give them an incentive to turn it around, because they'd rather the manager be nice to them, so go out and perform and do it. And I just wonder whether because the monies have just taken off in such a huge fashion over the past few years, that in the end, you see the cases at such as Arsenal, where Ozil signs a new contract and then basically all just about stops playing. And he's just signed a new 4-year contract. Which is absolutely crazy. And players, I don't think they have the sheer desire and ambition that we had back in the 70s and those in the 60s and the 50s. Because money has tainted all of that. Yeah, and also because of that wealth that they then have, they become almost autonomous, and therefore managers find it very difficult to speak to them, because they can just say, "Look, I don't need your money. I'm rich enough." Which is certainly nothing that I could have ever said, and all my teammates at Newcastle, because it was a totally different era and different financial situation. And I think that managers, they have to be honest and go into a dressing room, and if it's been bad, let them know just how bad it has been, because you've then got to start trying to put it right. And if you don't get that basic understanding of just how bad it was and how much improvement has to be made, then you're never going to be finding a true wavelength. between managers and coaches and then the players. It just won't happen. And I'd like to a bit more bluntness, because I just get the feeling that with the Newcastle players, in the way that they just appeared as if they were total strangers to what they had done on Sunday, and they needed snapping back into it, you know. And I saw Steve Bruce on the sidelines, you know, and he's sort of not really doing very much from there. He's not going you and pointing at people and really giving them a right old mouthful, just to let them know how displeased he is. He couldn't have been happy with what he was seeing last night. And I think that all the supporters would appreciate it when it's bad like it was last night, that Steve Bruce lets them know that he realises that it is that bad and is looking to and prepared to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all know Bruce's level, and again, you know, social media is not a great place. You end up with loads of arguments. I said this last night. We're still seeing it on major TV channels, Sky in particular, where Gary Neville is saying Steve Bruce is the man for the job under the takeover, and then they're comparing Bruce and Benitez. I mean, Benitez left the club last May. Why are we still comparing Steve Bruce with Rafa Benitez? This would never have been the case at all with previous managers. I can't remember, you know, Kevin Keegan leaving and you know, Kenny Dalglish being compared every week with you know, Kevin Keegan, and Dalglish leaving, and you know, them Ruud Gullit being compared. It just doesn't happen. It's a weird scenario. It seems as if the press have a bit of a bee in their bonnet about Benitez for whatever reason. You know, it's really strange, Mal. It's social media. It's the times we live in. And look, there's loads of questions coming in from people, so I don't want to ignore them. Guys, when you're watching as well, please like the video, the live broadcast, and share it as well. If you share it on your social media, just so we can get more people to watch, it would be great. Jed has sent a message in on Twitter. He's going to watch this later. He couldn't watch tonight, but he did ask me to ask you. He said, do you think the current Newcastle United Academy is fit for purpose, Malcolm? It seems like a closed shop of only broken dreams. So few seem to make it. And then he says, what tips for an under-15 without an academy to make a football career? So it's two questions, Mal. What do you make of Newcastle's academy at this moment in time? He says, is it a closed shop? And, you know, what advice would you give, you know, to an under-15 without an academy to make a football career?
Yeah, I suppose, you know, I don't get anywhere near that level at all. Nor the reserves, and so I can only look at what comes through, and what we've had are the two Longstaff brothers come through, and they are now just being completely ignored. One is going to be on the move, having shown a fair bit, considering that he only came in after the start of the season, and I find the way that they've been treated a little bit strange when Sean Longstaff was continually played with people that just didn't suit him at all, that they didn't give him the opportunity to get out there and show what he is. So, and the fact that neither brother is any part of the first team picture at the moment, I don't think that the academy then is respected. You know, if you when I was at Arsenal, that we as players, we would welcome a young player into the dressing room, and we would talk and communicate and help and give advice, and we would do as much as possible to help him when we were out on the field. At some clubs, you don't get that, and I get the feeling that it's perhaps not there at Newcastle. I saw when Sean Longstaff came into the side, I saw one or two players almost not going to assist him when he had the ball at his feet, and I thought, naughty, 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 and so and also the facilities. It took Newcastle a very long time to sort of get up to date and up to standard with facilities, and I'm still not sure whether they've actually got to the standard that other clubs have. That Newcastle have always lagged way behind Middlesbrough in their training facilities, for example, and if you're not prepared to do the facilities right, then you're not really concentrating on the youth process, moving into the reserves and creating talent to go into the first team. And there are those clubs that are buying clubs, and there are those clubs that look for talent to come through from the youth side. And I think Newcastle are a buying club. I don't think that they put the efforts into bringing kids through, which is a shame. It is a shame because there's a lot of very young talent up here in the northeast. There always has, and over the decades, good heavens, they've fed many clubs all around the country and even abroad.
Yeah. John, just Alan asks a question on the screen there, Mal. He says, "Evening, guys. I have a feeling Monday will be the day for the takeover. Surely the new owners want the City game out of the way rather than starting with a possible loss to their Middle East rivals." I've had a bit of banter on Twitter today, Mal, with people about the takeover. And to be honest, like I said last night when we did the after-match talk, I just think that even if the Premier League have passed this, there will be a cause for picking the right day to announce it, because there's a lot of things to take into consideration. For starters, we aren't mathematically safe yet. We are still in the FA Cup, and Steve Bruce is still, coaching the team. So if we had been taken over today, for example, and it was announced today, it could have an adverse effect on the rest of the season. You don't know, do you? I mean, suddenly the media go into overdrive speculating that Steve Bruce is now going to be out of a job. Players won't know where they are. I'm playing devil's advocate, I suppose, but what's your thoughts on that? And, do you think the takeover is going to be sooner rather than later, Mal?
I don't think it's going to be sooner, no. I think that would all be too much of a rush. There's an awful lot still to be done just to get the whole process, the amount. When you sign a player, there are at least 10 forms to get signed, and that's apart from the contract negotiations and what have you. Yeah. So when you've got, and this is pretty much the same as a transfer. It's somebody is a seller, which is Mike Ashley, and somebody is a buyer. Instead of a player, it's a football club. There's an awful lot to be done. Just when you're buying a club, if there's 10 different forms that need to be completed, you can be sure that there's going to be mammoth paperwork that needs to be sorted out, and there'll be a lot of people involved going through it all with a fine-tooth comb. And you can make sure that Mike Ashley is going to make sure that he is going to get absolutely everything that he wants. And so it will be a slow process. And if it doesn't happen until around the end of July, beginning of August, that wouldn't surprise me. And I think that would be a good time for it to happen. Get the season out the way so that nobody's worried about what their future is or anything like that. Let them worry after the season's finished, because there is nothing worse than a player concerned about his future because there's a takeover happening and his form goes goes down the plug hole, and then it can cause real problems, and as you say, relegation is still a possibility, although I think another couple of points and the bottom three, none of them will be able to get anywhere near Newcastle.
Les is saying that he keeps hearing the Premier League are busy. It'll take time for the takeover. Like doctors and nurses have not been busy, but they get on with it and do their job. Something smells about this. I know there's a lot of skepticism around it because Newcastle fans have been hurt before with previous takeovers. We've tried to allay the fears. We all believe, every single ex-player that I've had on this show over the last 6 to 8 weeks has all agreed, that they believe this is going to go ahead at some point, but it is going to take time. And I think the big worry that now fans are starting to say is if it does drag on, and we're only speculating here, we're not saying it's definitely going to happen, is that we run into the new season starting, the pre-season start. It hasn't been announced by the Premier League when the season's going to start, but we're looking at potentially September. It would only leave you maybe 4 or 5 weeks. And again, people are worried that it wouldn't get the new owners off to the greatest of starts. By the way, Mal, Arsenal have just took the lead, 1-0 away to Southampton.
So they have.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe they've finally found a bit of form.
Yeah. I mean,
but doing the deal in the close season between the following the end of the season, that will be a good time in which to do it. And I also think that the Premier League, they want to ensure that this season gets played out.
Yeah.
And so, that they're very much on their toes to make sure that everything stays right as rain, and they don't want to have any serious embarrassments at all. So their concentration is getting this season completed, which will be a feat in itself, and then they'll give full concentration to other matters. And probably top of the list after that is the Newcastle United takeover. It will happen, of that I'm sure. And you know me, I've been the biggest skeptic of all the takeover talks, but this is a real and genuine situation, I believe, and it will happen. There has been some controversy with regards to Saudi Arabia, the government, and stuff that's gone on there, and with television broadcasting rights and so on and so forth. I've heard a lot of stuff coming out of Saudi Arabia to seek to appease that.
Yeah.
Put it right. That tells me that everybody wants this deal to go through. So I would just say to Newcastle fans, relax and just let things take their course. All of the people involved, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some form of contact with the British government, just to make sure that everything stays sweet, and so it will happen, and I think around the end of the season, and so if they can target that. They can target it to do it the week after the season is finished.
Mm-hmm. Tom Dixon says Andy Carroll signed a new contract today, as did Manquillo, of course. Hopefully Matty Longstaff will follow him and sign a new contract. Yeah, again, Twitter went into meltdown today about the contract being signed. Andy Carroll signed a 1-year extension. Manquillo signed a 4-year deal. Newcastle as well have also brought in a goalkeeper, or they're bringing in a goalkeeper, Mark Gillespie. Fans won't recognise the name unless they went along to watch junior football, I don't think, but he was released by Newcastle when he was 16 and joined Carlisle United where he made his senior professional debut for them in May 2010. He's been at Blythe Spartans, etc. But he's a 28-year-old goalkeeper. He signed as a free agent after his deal with Scottish Premier League side Motherwell expires. So it's a return for a former player there. And I think that just adds to the speculation about, you know, Rob Elliott's time as a goalkeeper at Newcastle is coming to an end at the end of the season. There's also question marks over Carl Darlow's time now on Tyneside, and of course the future of Freddie Woodman. So goalkeepers, which has always been a strong position for Newcastle United, is, it's causing a bit of concern about these contracts being signed. But, and I've been asked a lot of questions about this on Twitter today, people asking me, will this be the new owners doing this? Well, no, it won't be, because we haven't got new owners yet. And other people saying, well, who's actually in charge of this? Well, it'll be Lee Charnley still and Steve Nixon, who is the head of recruitment, who will be either bringing any players in, and obviously they will be deciding who goes and who doesn't go. A lot of people asking, will they be in communication with the potential new owners? Well, again, no, because they won't have anything to do with it. So all of these decisions are still really Mike Ashley's football club and Mike Ashley's decisions, aren't they, Mal?
Yes, they are. They are, and I'm not sure that Mike Ashley is all that bothered one way or the other at the moment. He wants to see the takeover done, dusted, and completed. Thank you very much. And so Lee Charnley, he finds himself, I think, in a sort of rather strange situation. But he's still got to be making decisions. And probably he's sort of, he will be quite concerned about his own future.
Yeah.
And with Andy Carroll, I really would like to see him start games. At the moment he's confined to the last 20 minutes at the most. And I would like to see him start. He is a presence, and he causes mayhem amongst centre halves. And I think that, and certainly Joelinton doesn't. Centre halves must feel that they can take the afternoon off and have a cigar and a pint, and Joelinton is in the pocket and not even screaming.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to see more of Andy Carroll, without any doubt.
Would you start Gale alongside him? Kieran Williams has said there, start Gale and Carroll.
Start the two of them together. Absolutely, yes. And look at the way that they put that goal together against Aston Villa. It was the one really lovely bit of football that was seen, I think, on the whole of the night. Now, with Matty Longstaff, I really don't feel that he will sign for Newcastle. I think there's a lot of bad water gone under the bridge on this. That he must have felt over the past few months that he was almost just being ignored, despite the fact that he was playing in the first team. He was playing well. He even scored a goal or two, and so. And yet nobody was sitting him down and saying, okay, you're proving your case. Come on, son, let's get a contract sorted. To leave it all this while, I think he's very poor. And I would be very surprised if he hasn't been contacted with serious offers by an agent or whoever. But he would have a very good idea where his future lies. And
news on Matt Jones. Just that he has agreed a short-term deal extension until the end of the current season. Now that's Matty Long.
Yes. Okay, I understand that.
No commitment to the.
But there'll be no commitment any further. So see it through to the end of this season. But then he's a free agent, isn't he?
Yeah.
Now, see, for Newcastle to allow a lad like that at his tender age to be a free agent, you know, the world is his oyster from there. That's when you really make the biggest of financial killings. You know, he's got the vast majority of his career in front of him. He's got a track record, albeit not very much, but he has proved himself at Premiership level. He will have a huge amount of interest, and because there's no transfer fee, he will be able to make an absolute killing on his next contract, and it'll be a contract that will ensure that he never has to work again in his life as long as he stays sensible.
Yeah. Tom Dixon says, Malcolm, what sort of team should we play against Man City in the FA Cup?
A winning team.
That's
what I like to see. Excuse me. And if you look back over Man City in the last 2 or 3 years playing against Newcastle United, Newcastle is a bit of a banana skin to Man City.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to be overly confident on this one at all. Newcastle have given them problems in the past, and I don't see why they shouldn't be able to give them problems this Sunday if they turn out a performance that they gave against Sheffield United, not the rubbish that was against Aston Villa, and take the game to them. You know, I think that you know, when a side has got that bit of form against you, and you're a top side, but there is always that there's one or two sides that you find it difficult against, and I think it just turns out to be Newcastle is one of those clubs for Man City, and so they're not necessarily going to be overly looking forward to it at all. And I think that you play your best side, but you need to stick the ball in the net when you've got the opportunity, and that's why I would start with Carroll and Wednesday's goal scorer on Sunday. Start with them. It would be pointless starting with Joelinton. The fact that he, after all of that time, finally scored a goal, albeit it was from 2 or 3 yards, but nevertheless it was a goal. They all count the same. Having done that, I really expected to see him coming out and hustling and bustling and looking to fly goalwards, absolutely fly, and he just wasn't interested. And if he wants to confront me about saying that he's disinterested, fine. Because I would take him through the hour that he spent out in the field, and I didn't see him bothered about any particular challenge. He didn't get himself involved with the centre halves at all. Dear me, they had the easiest game of their lives, and his performance was all the worse for when Andy Carroll came on and showed him how it's done.
Yeah,
Andy Carroll made him look an absolute prize. He really did.
Yeah. NUFC 1892 says, what point do we take Joelinton out the starting lineup? Well, I think you've gathered from Malcolm's opinions. It's now. In fact, it should have been earlier. So that tells you exactly where we stand. Yeah. Graham Fox says, evening, Stephen, Malcolm. Do you think Fernandez is a bit frustrating? Whenever the ball is played over the top, he kicks the way he faces. Maybe take a second to have a look around. Yeah, it's also a topic of conversation, isn't it? Who's your best centre halves? I would always opt to probably play a fully fit Lejeune And then I would play either Shaw or Lascelles. To be honest, I would always say Lejeune would be my first pick. He would be my first choice. I think he's the best defender at the club when he's fit. But the problem is he's had 2 horrific injuries and he's struggling again with an injury. So, Lascelles isn't the greatest of centre halves. I always think Lascelles is very he reminds me a lot of Titus Bramble. I've got to be perfectly honest. He's like a more mobile version, but there's always a mistake in there or an error, or he switches off. But he's not a bad centre half. But I certainly I would say Lejeune is better than him. And I like Shaw. I really do like Shaw. Fernandez, I can take or leave him. I like Manquillo at fullback. And on the opposite side, I've got to be honest, I prefer to see Paul Dummett on the left when he's available, because he's a good defender, and I've always liked defenders as opposed to people who bomb up and down the line.
He's out for the rest of the season, isn't he, Paul Dummett?
Right. Yeah. That would be my in an ideal world. I would play with those 4 defenders at the back. I would play Lejeune, Shaw, and then fullbacks I would play Dummett and I would play Manquillo.
Right, but the lad who's playing left back at the moment, I think he's doing very well.
Yeah, 100%. I would
putting good performances in, but with regards to Fernandez and playing the way he's facing, that's not bad for a defender to do. That he's not he never tries to be clever or anything. He's not going to get caught in possession, and so if he needs to just boot it for a throw in, do so. And he gives throw-ins away, he gives corners away, and we should be able to defend those. But he's not caught trying to be clever in any way, so it's not a bad thing, is that? I listened to you carefully there, Steve, and I too I like Shaw, like him a lot, and I'm not sure whether the better pairing would be Shaw and Fernandez or Shaw and Lejeune. If I were the manager of Newcastle, I would want to just play the 3 of them around a bit, leave one out, and just find out which is the best pairing. Because Lejeune, sorry, not Lejeune. Was I saying Lejeune? I didn't mean that at all. I meant the skipper. And I just feel at times that he doesn't see everything that's going on as he should be able to from the back, and that he can get pulled out of position somewhat. And so I don't know. It's a good one. It's a point that people around a table in a pub, if that was allowed, they could argue all night long, and nobody would really have the answer.
Lots of comments coming in about Joelinton. I mean, there's so many. Tom Dixon saying, what do you think his preferred position would be? We've had somebody suggesting that he becomes a centre half, thinking that it would be best if he just concentrated on another position, because he's clearly not a centre forward.
Steve, I agree. He's not a centre forward. He just hasn't got the mentality, the desire, that nasty streak that all centre forwards have got to have. He hasn't got it. He hasn't got any of those. Is he good enough to go and play in another position? Not in the Premiership. No, I don't think he is. I feel absolutely frustrated that here is a player. He's the most expensive player that has come into this club.
Yeah,
and he just isn't a £40 million player in the slightest. He never has been, never is, and never will be. And really, I would like a steward's inquiry as to how this deal ever happened. Also, going further on that, why is Steve Bruce sticking with him?
Yeah.
When the fella is offering nothing up front, nothing at all. And in fact, Joelinton is turning Almiron into a poor player because Almiron just can't get on with the fella at all. Almiron needs an awful lot more help up front and will get it from Andy Carroll, for example. And so why is Steve Bruce continuing with it? And I keep thinking, well, what is going on in Steve's head? And all I can come back to is that somebody upstairs is saying, you've got to play him.
That's right. I would agree.
That's all I can think of. Because
it's crazy.
Because no Premier League manager should ever put up with such a run of bad performance as we've seen from Joelinton.
This is the difference, Mal. He's not a manager. Steve Bruce is not a manager. He's a coach. And there's a difference, isn't there? He's there to coach the players that he's given. And that's what I was saying. You know, people saying, well, what if the takeover doesn't go through? What if Steve Bruce brings in his players? Are these contracts that are being given out, Steve Bruce giving the players that he wants to keep? Of course it's not. Steve Bruce is a coach. Yeah. In fact, in the 13 years that we've been under Mike Ashley's stewardship, there's only really been Kevin Keegan who was brought in, and he thought he was the manager until he realised he wasn't. And that was why he fell out with the owner, because he brought Dennis Wise above him. He brought a guy who used to be a steward at Chelsea above him. We haven't had a manager because Mike Ashley doesn't like managers. He likes people who come in and do what they're told. I'll give you the players. You coach them. That's your job. That's it. You're not allowed to have an opinion under Mike Ashley.
Sure. But as a coach, if you see a player that's not good enough, is having a bad run.
Yeah, take him out.
Surely you've got the. If you're the head coach, surely you have the authority to say, "I'm leaving you out."
This is where you're right. £40 million man. They can't afford to have the embarrassment, and we'll never know the reason behind this. Jonathan Young backs us up. Joelinton isn't a number 9. He isn't a winger. He isn't a number 10. I just don't know why the hierarchy decided to pay £40 million for a complete flop. NUFC 1892. I read that Mike Ashley himself pushed the 40 million Joelinton transfer. You're right, 100% right, because Rafa Benitez was told he had to buy him. He didn't want to buy him. He told Mike Ashley, the owner, he wasn't worth 20 million.
The deal was done without Rafa. That's why they waited until Rafa was gone, and then the deal was done.
He didn't want him. Rafa didn't want him.
He didn't want him, and he actually said to them, as far as I'm aware, when it was pointed out that they had an interest in Joelinton, he said he's not good enough, and how much? And they told him 40 million. He said he's not worth half that.
It's crazy, Mark. I mean, it'll run and run. It's the biggest mystery of ours, and I mean, we'll never know the true story behind it. Andrew Kane, I will convert Joelinton into a centre back and bang him there. He's good at holding the ball up and winning it in the air. Nothing else. I think we're missing a trick. I don't even
win it in the air. Come on, Andrew. You tell me how many times in a game he has ever won the ball, and now and again he might get a header in. But certainly he hasn't got the bravery to go and really challenge, and as a centre half, a big strapping centre forward. I don't think he's got it in him to really go and out battle somebody and take him on physically.
Yeah,
we don't see it from him as a centre forward, and I don't think we'd see it from him as a centre half. And you have to be physical, no matter what.
Gavin Jones says, did you see Stephen Ireland's comment about when he was told he could only be played, he could only be played 4 times due to 50,000 appearance fee? Surely Joelinton's situation is the same, i.e. being told what to do. Yeah, I saw Stephen Ireland's comments. And this is the problem as well. Agents put things in contracts, and unfortunately, again, for the last 13 years, it seems we haven't had anybody at that football club who has been a football man or a football person. They come from different backgrounds. Lee Charnley was making cups of tea when I was at St James's Park. You went from having somebody like Russell Cushion, who was part of the old guard, to, John Irving coming in and Chris Mort coming in, who, Chris Mort, lovely guy. He's not a football guy. He doesn't have the contacts. He doesn't know about contract. He knows contracts and stuff, but they didn't know.
Yeah, he didn't really understand the game. He was a lovely guy, and he was probably a very good businessman, but he didn't know and understand football in any way. And he was quite honest about that. He said, I don't really understand the ins and outs.
And that's the problem. Here lies the problem. We've had non-football people running a football club. And that's what's happened to Sunderland as well, by the way. And look at the mess they're in.
Well, yes, but and look right now at this very moment at Burnley, Sean Dyche. He's come out publicly and said, I'm not going to be here very much longer because I'm at such odds with the chairman, because he is a true football man and he wants to run Burnley as a football club, whereas it would appear that his chairman wants to run it as a business. Now the football club will always be, it's a business that is always going to be different to other businesses, always. Because it's got its own set of rules. That it's playing under the auspices of the Football Association, under the Premier League. UEFA have a say as well, and so does FIFA. And so it is a business, but it's nothing like ordinary business outside of football.
Yeah, you're right, 100%. Carl Fowler says, I bet there's something in the contract that Bruce has to play Joelinton again.
Yeah, you see, it wouldn't surprise me.
Backoid says, take the number 9 off Joelinton. Jason Carter says, I think Joelinton would happily give the number 9 shirt back, no questions asked. Well, I mean, it is becoming an issue, Mal. It was an issue earlier on in the season. We've had 3 months off. He's come back, and there's still really no change in the guy's attitude. And I don't think we'll ever know. And this is, Jason says, I think Joelinton's a perfect example of Ashley flexing his proverbial muscles and saying, I'm the owner and that's what I'm doing, like it or lump it, a statement of power. I would have to agree with that as well.
Yeah. Is it Ashley or is it somebody else? But the big question mark has got to be with Steve Bruce. Why are you playing him every game? Because there is a time that and it comes once, twice, maybe half a dozen times through a season with different players, that a manager sees a player and looks and thinks, you're struggling out there. I've got to do you a favour. I've got to do you the favour of leaving you out and saying, come on, have a couple of games in the reserves. Get your mojo back. Get your desire back. And that should have happened with Joelinton a long time back this season. I found this with youngsters when I was managing, that youngsters, they come into the first team and for 4 games, they would be absolutely 100%. They'd be flying about. They'd be getting, throwing themselves into tackles, and they were absolutely terrific. The 5th game, they weren't quite so. They were getting a bit tired. Come the 6th game, they'd be exhausted, and so I found that I had to take them out and just play them a couple of games in the reserves if they wanted. And what happened was that they just cleared their mind, and I had dropped a boy, and when I welcomed him back into the first team, he was a man. Yeah. That break had completely altered the whole thinking, the whole way that he viewed how to play the game of football. It had all the pennies had dropped into the right slots. Mm-hmm. That should happen with Joelinton, because remember that he's come from abroad, and the Premier League Football over here in England is totally alien to him, and he's playing as if it still is, even after all these games. And so leave him out for all the pennies to fall into place, and then maybe bring him back and see if he's a different player.
Yeah.
And you have to give him that second chance. But to keep playing him, I think, is torture. And I think that this has been going on so long now that to deal with the torture, I think he's just switched off.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can switch that off, I'm switching the torture off. And I think that's what we've got. And he's not really thinking about what he's doing out in the field. He's not thinking about his game and what he should be doing. He's just going through the motions. And we've been seeing that in his last, I don't know, 15 games and more probably.
Yeah. Kieran Williams says, what players are good enough to stay on if the takeover happens, Mal?
To be quite honest, from what I'm understanding of what these Saudi Arabians want to do, I think that you will virtually see a complete and utter clear out over a couple of seasons, and I'm not sure there would be. You look at St Maximin, he probably would be one. I think Richie, he does terrific, but his age is against him now, and it probably would be time to move on, and he'd welcome that. I think he's done absolutely wonderful in his time at Newcastle. And then I look around at well, what is there? And you tell me a really outstanding player that's in the Newcastle side without St Maximin in it.
Yeah, you was struggling. When you say outstanding, it's a strong word. I mean, for me, I think Dubravka would stay, but I think they would build from the back. I think any new owner would. I think I said this to you the last time we spoke last week. I think that they would want a good, strong centre half. People might laugh at us when I say it, and I know we've got 5 or 6 centre halves at the club, but we haven't got a leader. Lascelles is captain in name only. He's not a leader. Yeah, he's not a Frank Clark. He's not a Joe Harvey. He's not a Glenn Roeder. He's not a leader of men. You don't hear Lascelles on the pitch. If it's a perfect time for people to realise this. If you listen to the game without the crowd noise on, you hear Richie, but you don't hear anybody else.
Sure, absolutely. And also, Steve, just to pick up on what you're saying, because as you were saying it, that yes, you get that kingpin in the middle of your defence. Mm-hmm. Liverpool took off when they took the centre half from Southampton. They paid what for him? 75 million. Who pays 75 million for a centre half? But Klopp knew exactly what he was doing and exactly what he was getting. And from that fella going into the centre of the Liverpool defence, Liverpool just went and took off. And so it can happen from the back. So, well, whether you can find another one like that, I don't know. But yes, that's how you start. But it's very expensive if you're going to chase trophies.
Yeah, I think
very expensive.
We are struggling, Mal. I mean, look, it's a team which has got a work ethic which Rafa Benitez installed, and I know I'm going back to Rafa now, but it's a work ethic and a backs against the wall kind of squad. There's a lot of friends in that dressing room. Your Shelby's, your Lascelles, your Richies. It's the nucleus of a good, hard-working squad, which will always, be able to to grind a result out. And I think, as I say, it's a backs against the walls team. It's been a very much them and us kind of thing.
Yeah, very much. Yes. Yeah, but it's the pressure has been very much on the defence.
Yeah.
Over the past 2 or 3 years. So, and the players have sort of got into that. If you just go and look at other sides, like when Pochettino first went to Spurs, all of a sudden, Spurs players, they found freedom in the way that he had them playing, and they just took off. And okay, he didn't actually quite win anything, but it was a real revolution as to what was happening on the pitch.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that these people will, once they bought Newcastle and they put the investment in. That's the kind of thing they're looking for. Except that they would like to, once you're up there, they want to stay, make it count as well, and start winning things.
Yeah.
And so I know that Pochettino has been mooted as a possible incoming manager at St James Park, but the reason why is because of that effect that he had on Spurs. Other clubs want that kind of effect happening at their place, and so automatically his name gets bandied around by the press. But yes, it needs a breakaway from Benitez, stroke Bruce, and something more happening. If success is going to come, players would need to move on. But that's the game of football, and everybody would, and everybody just has to accept it, get on, call the removal men, and go house hunting again somewhere else. It's a part of the business.
It is. Last couple of minutes, Mal. So just going to get through these last couple of points.
Okay.
A Square says, leaders, listen to Barry Venison chat the other night. Realised during Keegan's days we had multiple leaders on the pitch. We only have Richie at the moment. Danielle says, thanks so much, gents. Love this once again. We'll get there eventually with this takeover, and it will all be worth it. Thanks to Mal for his passion, love, and service to our club. What a legend.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Danielle.
Tom Dixon says, Malcolm, what's your prediction for Sunday's game, the FA Cup game against Man City?
Do you know, I don't know. I really don't know. I know what I'm hoping for, but maybe my hope is going beyond reason. But the game is at St James Park, and if Newcastle can put together the kind of performance they showed against Sheffield United, then there's every chance that they could get through. So, you're looking for a final score, aren't you?
Yeah.
Hey, rascal. Do you know, I really don't know. I really, really don't know. I think I'm just going to sit down, and I've never failed to give you a prediction when you've asked for it. But I think this one, I'm just going to have to sit down and let the game come to me and see how it flows. And then maybe after 20 minutes, I could have an indication. But right now, I just have no idea.
Yeah, it's got me snookered as well, Mal. I'll probably leave it till my show tomorrow night with the Geordie dentist and Steve Hasty, but I will make a prediction. Graham Knox says, great show, lads. SUPERMAC, come back and help us out. I'm sure you can still put more effort in than Joelinton. Spackard says, good stuff, lads. Hopefully can soon. And Claire Brown says, excellent interview. Thanks again. Keep smiling. See what Sunday brings. Jonathan Young says, Newcastle 1, City 4, unfortunately, is his prediction. Jeff says, thank you both so much. It's a privilege to spend time in your company. How are the grown-ups? Colin Wilson says, great crack once again. Andrew, great show. Thank you, mate. And John Justice Allen Hart says 2-1, but my head says 3-0. So, yeah, I think there's been a reality check after that Villa game, Mal.
I think so, yes. You know, which team is going to emerge? The one that played Sheffield United or the one that played Aston Villa? And they really were chalk and cheese, and yet it was all the same individuals. So if they come out, if the Sheffield United side come out, then I think we've got a chance against Man City, and they'll be a little bit nervy. I don't think they find St James Park a comfortable place to play.
I think you're right. Well, Malcolm, I will look forward to speaking to you after the game on Sunday, and hopefully celebrating a place in the semi-finals.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Hey, wouldn't it be lovely to have a trip to Wembley?
It would.
Would we be allowed to go?
Well, I've told John Gibson I'm carrying his bag. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'll be stuck in lockdown still.
All right, Malcolm, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will speak to you Sunday night after the game.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everybody, for taking part as well with us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, me and the Geordie dentist, Dan Neil Mitchell. Thanks, guys. Good night. Cheers, Malcolm. Bye-bye.
Good night.